All right. Stop the music. Listen. So I have been working on rearranging my office and getting it all cleaned out, and I'm trying to make some new spaces to make it easier to set up permanent recording locations and things like that for the different videos that we do. And I'm not done. It's a mess. There's equipment, boxes, stuff everywhere. It's kind of a disaster. My closet though is fairly well cleaned out, so that was a plus. Got that done this weekend. So I'm not going to record in our normal location because I just don't have time to set everything up. This has been a crazy news week with the stuff about the book that has come out, and I want to talk about that a little bit today. But I don't have a script. I don't have a teleprompter today. I don't have any of the stuff I would normally do to constrain my time. So I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to actually switch cameras. And this one's probably going to be a little long because I tend to go on when I'm just improvising. So deal with it. You get an extra 20 or 30 minutes of content today. Awesome.
Anyway, what I want to talk about, though, a little bit, two things. One is the book. So we've covered the book quite a bit since the story broke on Sunday night. And I think that what this is really about isn't celibacy. That's what I think. I think that, the book obviously is about celibacy. But here's how I think this went down. I think that Benedict and Cardinal Sarah, they both were legitimately concerned about the discussions that they were seeing about the relaxation of priestly celibacy. This was a thing that they thought, it needed to be dealt with. They had both been reflecting on it. Apparently, Benedict had been writing about it even leading up to the synod because he knew it was a topic. And they kind of corresponded, got together, did some work, decided to turn it into a book. And they didn't really think about perhaps the way the polemic would be perceived. This was something, one of the many articles I've read this week, it was brought to the attention, not just, I think, of them, but also of Archbishop Gonswein, that this was going to be taken as, very polemical, as a direct refutation of what the Pope was doing. Now, Francis has been very clever and very crafty, and he's been out there saying, well, I don't support the relaxation of voluntary celibacy. I think that is actually a mistake. He's been saying this since 2017. He's been saying it. At the same time, his pals, Leonardo Boff and Cardinal Hummus and Bishop Krautler and I believe Cardinal Marx have all gone on the record saying, well, he talked to us and encouraged us to come up with unconventional solutions, for how we would deal with the problem in the Amazon or the problem in the German church. There have been a number of articles mentioning that he's encouraged them to propose solutions even while he holds the line. And there's a lot of cleverness. There's a lot of stalking horses that get put out. There's always the ongoing Hegelian dialectic that happens. But he's been careful not to personally promote this idea of, hey, let's get rid of celibacy, right? So I think what happened is, for one thing, I don't know how to say it without it seeming insulting, but I think there's a lot of credulous behavior going on here. It's as though Cardinal Sarah and Pope Benedict, Pope Emeritus Benedict, former Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger, whatever we should really call him, because I don't like this current situation. They looked at Pope Francis saying this stuff and decided to take him at his word. These are men who are older. Obviously, Benedict is 92. I don't know Sarah's age, but he's in his 70s, if I'm not mistaken. He looks younger, but he's in his 70s. So these are guys who are academics. They're intellectuals. They are not, Cardinal Sarah's got a Twitter account, but he's not hanging out on Twitter interacting with people all day. I don't think they don't have any real idea of the way people communicate now as opposed to the way that they used to. And so writing a book is a natural academic exercise on a topic that you're concerned about, and you're expecting that people who are qualified will read these theological reflections and all this kind of stuff, right? So they don't realize that everybody's analyzing and scrutinizing every move. I don't think. I'm not sure. But they also think, well, Pope Francis said this, and we're on his side in saying this, and so we're going to back him up. and we're going to write this book, and we're going to say, yeah, here we go. Here are all these reasons why we think celibacy is important. Father Festio came on and EWTN's nightly news program, and he flat out said, there's nothing about this book, and he's the publisher in English, there's nothing about this book that is in opposition to Francis. In fact, he said that they quoted him very, very positively. Those were his words. Very, very, two varies, positively in the book about celibacy. So they all see themselves as being on the same page. And I think sincerely so. I think that they believe, as I highlighted in one of my columns earlier this week, that it's the media and the blogs and whatever. I mean, media is an all-encompassing term, I think, for guys like this who are used to only journalistic sources. Now, there's a lot of different sources of information. There's social media and there's all this stuff. I think it's all getting lumped together. And they're saying the media is promoting this idea that the Amazon Synod wanted to see a relaxation of celibacy. I believe that they believe that. They said that there was the synod of the media and the real synod. And I highlighted earlier this week that Pope Benedict said the same thing in 2013 in one of his last speeches as Pope. He said the same thing about the Second Vatican Council, that there was the council of the media and the real council, and that the real council was conducted in faith, but the media wanted to politicize it and make it about all these issues. And he actually blamed the media for all the bad things that came out of the council, the changes to the liturgy and all this stuff. He actually laid that blame at the feet of the media. It wasn't the media. This was an infiltration of the church. That's what it was. That's what it is now. There are actual bishops and cardinals who are pushing this stuff. They always have been at the root of this. The media can't make that happen. The media didn't make the Pontifical Commission for Birth Control come out with a consensus, or at least a majority opinion, that birth control, artificial birth control, should be allowed, right? It was the Pontifical Commission for Birth Control that came out with that. And they had a year to promote that in the media. They used the media to gain leverage for their position. And so when Humanae Vitae came out, it was essentially a dead letter because they had already been telling the world that their findings were, we're going to allow contraception. And so Humanae Vitae comes out and everybody's like, so what? We don't care. We're already down this road. We've already gone down there. So it's not to say that the media doesn't play a role, because it does, but it's not the same. It is not as though the media is the origin of this stuff. It may be a catalyst. It may enhance it, but it's not where the bad stuff that is a result of a synod or a council is coming from. So, but I think they believed it. I think Sarah and Benedict believed this. So they write this book. They put it out. That Sarah has issued a public communique where he says, despite reports that Benedict is saying he was not informed that it was going to be put into a book in the way that it was, and that he didn't know about the cover, he says, no, I sent him everything. I sent him the cover back in November, etc. So now we get to the next part of this little puzzle, which is the accusations that Benedict is old and being abused. And we've seen accusations that, the man sleeps all the time and, is barely conscious and he's being taken advantage of. First of all, not a snowball's chance in hell that Cardinal Sarah is taking advantage of Pope Benedict. Just not. Now, I'm not a big Sarah fan because I think he is a company man. I think he is all in on the post-conciliar experiment. I think that he is one of those guys that sees that everything in tradition should be subjected to, the Nouvelle theology, that, all the stuff that came out of the council. He's constantly saying that there needs to be a fusion of the old and the new masses. He's not a guy I can follow ideologically because I think he's really infected with modernism. However, I also think he's a really holy guy. I think he's 100% sincere. I think that he loves God and he loves the church, and that through whatever his lens of formation is, he's doing the best he can based on what he knows. And I look at that man as someone who is obeisant and respectful of authority and of theological minds greater than his and of his elders. He didn't do anything to take advantage of Benedict. So let's start there. I also think that if you know what it's like to live with or work with an elderly person, multiple things can be true without constructing the narrative that's being pushed. I live with an 87-year-old man, my father-in-law. He'll be 88 this year. At this point in his life, that he sleeps a lot. It's normal. It's normal for them to sleep a lot. Takes a ton of naps. It's one of the reasons why he lives with us, because we can help keep an eye on him and make sure he's okay and get him to where he needs to go. If he has to go to the doctor, has to go to the store, whatever, right? There is an aspect of care that has to happen there. But I don't think we could take advantage of him if we wanted to. I don't think he can be persuaded to do things he doesn't want to do. I don't think we could swoop in and publish a book with him while he was taking a nap, because that's ridiculous. He is a very strongly opinionated man. He still has his own mind. He forgets things because when you get older, your short-term memory goes and your long-term memory stays. And that's just part of the aging process. So you may not remember that you had a conversation with someone a week ago about the thing that you're now talking about again, but you remember everything you did for the first 50 or 60 years of your life, and you tell those stories over and over and over, because the long-term memory, it's stored, it's there. The short-term memory is not making the new pathways, so you forget things that happened recently. So why do I say all of this? Well, I don't think Benedict was taken advantage of because of his age. I don't think the fact that he naps means that he's incompetent. And I don't think the fact that he is saying that he never reviewed or saw the material means he never reviewed or saw the material. He may very well have done so and completely forgotten. Because I have these arguments in my daily life. No, we told you about this. We were both there. We both, heard the conversation. You're just not remembering it. No, it didn't happen. These conversations happen. This is part of being 85 plus years old. It's just what happens to the brain in many cases. So it's possible that all of these things are true, and that at the same time, it doesn't lead to the conclusion that Benedict has been taken advantage of, that he's lying, that Cardinal Sarah's lying. None of that. None of that is necessarily the case, okay? So stop there. The book is announced. Pandemonium ensues, like any blogger watching this could have told you it would. And people immediately begin applying their confirmation bias to what they're seeing that's going on, right? They're applying confirmation bias and they're saying, well, I think that Benedict is actually playing 15-dimensional chess against Francis because he's secretly, truly the Pope, and he's undermining him, and he's going to expose, no, that's not happening. I'm sorry, it's not happening. This is not that. There are the Team Francis guys, Austin Ivory and Max Beans, sorry, and Rich Raho and all these guys, Father James Martin, right? SJ, I have to always remember to say the SJ afterward. So they're all out there and they're feeling super butthurt and offended. Yeah, I'm going to use the word. And they're all offended because they're like, look, this is why we shouldn't have a Pope Emeritus, because he's undermining Francis and he's doing this on purpose and blah. So they're seeing that he's working against Francis, right? So we have two camps, totally ideologically opposed, who both think Benedict is working to undermine Francis with this work. Benedict, in my opinion, doesn't think that he's undermining Francis, wouldn't undermine Francis, hasn't undermined Francis yet, has praised him more than he has ever. Well, he's never really criticized him. He has praised him. He has said that despite differences of style and temperament, their two pontificates are in continuity. He has made public affirmations of praise for Pope Francis and zero public criticisms of Francis. There are things that he has said and things that he has done that people have interpreted or perceived as being critical, but they are not objectively so. So to assume that he's doing this, whether you're on the progressive side or whether you're on the Orthodox side, doesn't matter, because it doesn't mean that that's actually what's happening. Which is why I think the reaction has been, and again, we're dealing with a lot of rumors and innuendo and intrigue. We don't know what's actually happening behind the scenes because Benedict never just steps up to the microphone and says, hey, this is what happened. But we're hearing that he is the one who asked to have his name removed as co-author. We're hearing that he is the one saying, I didn't know that I was going to be on the cover. He is distancing himself from this. And there are people saying Francis demanded it, that he be removed. And maybe he did. Maybe he did demand it. And maybe Benedict was only too happy to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble here. I don't even remember having the conversation about how the shape that this was going to take. Yes, I contributed to it, but I thought I was supporting you, blah, blah, blah. He's on board, I think, with saying, okay, I'll step back. I don't need the credit here. Now, it makes Cardinal Sarah look bad because he looks like he's lying or it looks like he's manipulating. But I don't think that man has the capacity for guile. He's just not that guy. He is sometimes obsequious to a fault, but he is not a dishonest man. And he takes his vocation very seriously and his role very seriously. So that's not happening. So it's a lot of, excuse me, I think it's a lot of miscommunication. I think it's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of interpretation that's going on here. But really what it was is they just wanted to write a book because they thought celibacy was theologically important. They put together some poignant reflections, which, I think it's great. I think the number one thing it's good for is that it will reaffirm many priests who are struggling with celibacy because, it's a lot to give up the companionship of a spouse and children and, all of the appurtenant joys of marriage, which is not to say that marriage isn't also extremely difficult in many cases, because it is. But I've heard from priests who say that the modern priestly life is it's not just one of loneliness, but of isolation, particularly with the infiltration of the homosexual subculture and the priesthood. It can be very difficult between priests that are not Orthodox. For a good, holy priest, a solid, red-blooded, straight man in the priesthood, to find fraternity and fellowship with other priests. And so he's very much alone. He has to be very careful about not getting close to women in his parish. He has to be very careful about not fraternizing too much with the altar boys and giving the wrong impression there. He's lucky if he's included with married men. Married men don't always want to bring a priest into their gatherings because they're talking about married guy stuff. They can be very isolated and alone. So I can appreciate that there are priests who are struggling with celibacy right now because they're more isolated and their roles as priests are more adulterated than they've ever been in the history of the priesthood because of the post-conciliar changes and all the people that are on the altar doing their job. I mean, read the article, The Emasculation of the Priesthood, that we republished, a couple of years ago from Father James McLucas. It's long, but it's an amazing look at how the priestly vocation is subjected to a form of spiritual adultery all the time because the roles of the ministerial priest have been taken by the laity in the post-conciliar era. So it's a hard time to be a priest. It's a hard time to give up the consolations of marriage and family and the love of a woman to be a priest. And so there are priests struggling with celibacy. And I think this book for them can be encouraging. It can be a balm, for those wounds that they feel. That's who it's going to help. What it's not going to do rhetorically is change the conversation about celibacy. It's not going to change what the guys who were architecting the Amazon Synod are pushing for. It's not going to change the desire to ordain married deacons and empower viri probati and then spread this indult to other regions of the world, beginning in places like Germany where they have no priests because they don't have the faith and nobody wants to be a priest for a church that is bizarre and heretical. They just don't want to do it. So all of that is still going to continue to happen. So the strange thing is this is sort of a tempest in a teapot over nothing. This book, had it just come out, would probably not have made many waves or even sold many copies. I mean, it would have sold some, but people don't have time to read books anymore. I don't have time to read books. I'm reading and writing all day, articles and interacting with people online and all this stuff. At the end of the day, I don't want to sit down with a book. There are books I want to read. They're piling. I mean, look at the shelves behind me. A lot of these books I haven't even read yet. And And I need to. There's stuff in there I need. But to sit down and try to read after all that, my brain is done. It's fried. It's burned out. We process too much information every day. So the idea that it's going to have mass appeal to regular people who, are just burned out from the information overload of their everyday life, it's probably wasn't ever going to be a thing. The people who believe that priestly celibacy is a necessary discipline rooted in a doctrine, because remember, the Council of Trent anathematized anyone who said that consecrated virginity and the celibate state were not a higher calling, a higher state of life than that of matrimony. This is what we believe. It's a higher calling. It's a higher state. So anybody who already believes that, they don't need this book to be persuaded. It may bolster their arguments, but they don't need it because they already believe it. Anybody who disagrees with it, the Crowtlers of the world who are pushing for something else, they don't care about this book. They're not going to read it. So it's one of those things where the positions are already ossified. The battle lines have been drawn and everybody's in their trenches. They're in their foxholes. You're not going to get a lot of movement back and forth between them because of this book. So this book wasn't really a threat, in my opinion. And it's weird in a way that so much controversy has happened because of it. But I would say this is about control. This is about the united front. This is about the appearance that Francis is the benevolent, well-loved monarch of the church, and everybody's on board, including his predecessor, with, all of his trappings of orthodoxy and his veneer of agreement with everything. And I think it's Mensheviks and Bolsheviks. Benedict is not entirely out of continuity with Francis. He is much more of an authentic Christian. He actually, I think, believes in the faith. Francis doesn't seem to believe very much at all, except for in his own personal political ideologies. But I think in terms of their approach to the modern Catholic life, there are more separations of degree than kind. I'm open to further discussion on that. But I would say that Benedict and Francis have more in common with each other than either of them have in common with Pope St. Pius X, for example. So that's kind of where I look at it on the spectrum. So we have all of this going on, and now Francis is probably upset, or at least his cabal around him of henchmen are upset, because this looks like he's talking out of turn. So this is where Marco Tosati's analysis that it was Archbishop George Gonswein around which all of this orbited matters the most, because Gonswein is a handler to both popes. He's the personal secretary to the former pope, who still dresses and looks like a pope. And it's such a bad idea. Never do this again. Can we just agree that we're never going to do this Pope Emeritus garbage again? Okay. So he's personal secretary to Benedict, has been for a long time, but he's also the prefect of the papal household to Francis. He is the man in the middle. And there's a lot that could be explored about that role, but it's important to recognize that he is sort of an openly double agent here, right? And according to Tosati, he didn't take seriously that this thing was happening for whatever reason. I mean, it could just be as simple as it just didn't register for him that this was happening and that was going to be a big deal. It was like, oh, there's a book and he's, sending some material over, and maybe he didn't really think about it. Tosati said he didn't read it ahead of time. He didn't review anything. And suddenly it's out there. And now he's the guy who is in the position between the two popes, feeling the pressure, feeling maybe the pinch over his oversight. And he's going, put on the brakes. Stop, right? So he is the catalyst, I think, for this controversy, because it's his job to create the détente between the two popes, if you want to call it that. Again, I don't think there's as much conflict between them as many do, but to at least create the united front, to make everything look like, hey, we're all good, we're all getting along, everything's fine. Benedict is, in his little hidey hole over here, and he's not coming out. We're going to let Francis have the spotlight. Everybody's happy. We're all friends. Okay. So control is the reason for the controversy. I think a lot of people are misjudging this. I think ultimately it's not going to make a huge difference. It's going to die down. And I don't know. Like sometimes I think we're missing something. I've had people ask me, well, if this is a distraction, what are they distracting us from? I don't see the other hand right now. If there's another one, I don't see it. I don't think that's it. I think this is about ego management. I think this is about what this story really is about transparently for us is a couple things. One, the Vatican is a chaotic disaster. And it's not just because of Francis, but I think it's gotten worse under him because of his unpredictability and his temper and all this stuff. I mean, you want to know why I focused on the lady getting slapped, the Chinese lady getting slapped by the Pope? Because if his anger behind the scenes is the reason for the tempest, if he's mad because Benedict appears to have talked out of turn and needs to be put back in his place, he's smacking him down rhetorically. This is a theme that comes back again and again, right? So I don't know that that's what's happening, but those rumors are percolating up. They're saying he's upset. He wanted this thing clamped down. So that's one thing that we can take away from this. Another thing that I think we can take away from this, and I think this is the most important thing, it's also the most depressing thing. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to save us. So everybody who thought that Benedict and Sarah were like, yeah, we're going to start a rebellion, that didn't happen. That's not what this was. They folded like a house of cheap cards the minute any pressure was applied to their position. Sarah already has said, we're going to change co-authorship. It's clear that Benedict is a co-author. This is semantic stupidity. He contributed like 40 pages to this book. He is a co-author of the book. There's in the real world where words have meanings, there's no question that he's a co-author of this book. But they're still going to change it, according to Sarah. And they're going to remove the co-authorship on future editions. I think they're going to change the cover. He's, again, obsequious to a fault, willing to fall on every sword that he can find in his vicinity to make this problem go away so that he's a good little soldier. Benedict appears to be the one saying, I want it all removed. So he's not standing up for anything. This is not a fight between the old pope and the new pope. And if it looked like that, and if you thought that's what it was, and you got excited for a minute, you can be forgiven for thinking that. I think we all kind of had that moment of, ooh, is he finally speaking up? But then we were all like, but wait, why speak up about celibacy that's not even a dogma or doctrine when we've got all this other stuff? Communion for the divorced and remarried. He didn't speak up about that. The Abu Dhabi statement saying that God had willed other religions. Oh, that's heresy. He didn't speak up about that. What about changing the death penalty teaching? That's a heresy. No, didn't speak up about that. What about the million other things that have gone on? What about the Pachamama idolatry? What about everything else that's been more wrong than this that the Pope himself has pushed harder? What about communion for Protestants where he refused to forbid it? And he started moving people in the direction of intercommunion. What about Martin Luther being enshrined in the Vatican and being celebrated and having the statue there and Pope Francis saying that, he hadn't done anything wrong on justification? There are so many other things that are higher priority that Benedict could have addressed. This is not a hill he came out to die on. It's just not what it is. He just has a lot of thoughts on this and thought he'd offer them and didn't realize that it was causing trouble. And I really think that's as complicated as this is. And I mean, in hindsight, I hope we have more clarity, but that's my take. And feel free to let me know if you think I'm wrong. Leave comments to your heart's delight, and I will engage with them as much as I can. The second piece of information I wanted to give you today, because without a script, the OnePeterFive minute is now half an hour, and this is going to be the exception. Usually I script it so that it's 12 minutes or less. Try to keep it short, but it didn't happen today. Second piece is rumors are now also percolating. I don't know that I've seen an official report yet that the post-synodal apostolic exhortation from the Amazon Synod will be coming in February. So in the immortal words of Samuel L. Jackson's character, who I can't remember from Jurassic Park, I can't remember the name, Ray something, hold on to your butts because it's coming. That's all I got for today because I'm over time. Thank you for putting up with my messy office. Hopefully by next week I will have things locked down and rearranged. But I've been too busy working to actually clean up. So I don't have any minions to do that for me. I got to do that myself. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please subscribe. Make sure you hit the little bell icon on YouTube, because that's the only way you get notified about new videos. Share it with your friends. Please feel free to share widely. And then, of course, today is the 15th of January. This marks the day of my official duty to ring the fundraising bell for January. We are trying, as always, to keep everything afloat. So if you like our work and you think that it's valuable, just head on over to OnePeterFive.com/donate and drop a couple bucks in the collection basket if you would be so kind, because that's how we keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
It's official. This is the longest OnePeterFive minute ever. The OnePeterFive 30-minute. You know, minute, by the way, was supposed to connote brevity. It wasn't supposed to be literally a minute. It was just, they're short. That's what that was about. Oh, and one more thing. What was I going to say? So the book right now is selling really well. Someone just told me, I think it's #1 in France right now or something like that. This book would not have sold this many copies if it weren't for this controversy. So maybe my whole analysis should get thrown out, and we should look and see that it's a conspiracy between the publishers to make this happen, because they're selling a lot of copies of a theological book. I mean, I'm just saying, could be Father Fessio masterminded this whole thing. All right, so I have requests for accents and funny voices, and since this one's already way off format, I'm just gonna throw a few on at the end. In Russia, OnePeterFive minute would involve significantly more vodka. People talking about OnePeterFive minute being too long? In Russia, OnePeterFive minute times you. Joke is not really working, but it was joke.
And then we got all these people who are like, I want voices. I want you to do funny voices. But the thing is, I can't always work the funny voices in. I mean, how am I supposed to talk about serious church news sounding like this? Doesn't make any sense at all. It would be absolutely loony.
Despite the outrageous French accent, I cannot read the words of Cardinal Sarah when he is tweeting in Francais, because this accent is only, how you say, a facade.
All right, well, that's enough of that then, isn't it? I don't know how to go about including these all the time. I'd do it if I could, but I can't, so I won't. Anyway, the bloopers have now run on almost as long as the show. It's time to stop. Get out of here. Go home. Go to your families. Read a book. Go for a walk. Talk to your dog. I don't care. Have some haggis. Whatever you do, stop watching this right now, because it's over. The end.